Hello and welcome everyone. We'll get started in just a moment. I just want to give people a chance to file in and get their audio preferences settled.
We should have music here.
Yeah, we used to play the planets. We had Jupiter and a few of those other ones going, but maybe we'll start doing that again. That's a good idea.
The instrumental Girl from Ipanema, right? You have to do that one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we used to have a lobby. It was a 15-minute lobby period where we had classical music playing. It's maybe not a bad thing to bring back. All right, so we'll get started there. Thanks for joining everyone today. Before I hand it off to the panel, I just want to cover a few technical details. This is Zoom webinar. If you've never used that platform before or joined us for one, it's very similar to Zoom meeting with a couple key exceptions. The first and most immediately apparent is that you can't be seen or heard. Your cameras and mics are disabled by default. So you are limited to text interaction with both the panel and each other. If you have any kind of comments or discussion that you want to add, you can use the chat. Just make sure that you select everyone from the dropdown instead of host and panelists. Otherwise, only the host and panelists will see it. And if you have a question for the panel, you can ask that at any time. Just click on the little Q&A button and you can ask your question there. You can do that anonymously, but either way, people will be able to see what the question was and they could add their own comments or thumb it up if they so choose. So without further ado, I want to hand it off to Wendy Kilgore. Who's going to be moderating the panel today.
Thank you, Mike. And welcome, everyone. Welcome to a comprehensive view of undergraduate class scheduling, practice, policy, data use, and technology. It's a mouthful there, but we have a lot to cover. We are going to take some time today to go over the results of the report briefly, but I also wanted to reiterate Mike's discussion here about the housekeeping. So we'll do a Q&A about the 45-minute mark, and please ask your questions in the question and answer section, and we will move from there. What we're going to do is spend most of the time letting our panelists talk to each other. We have some set questions for them, and we will put a link to the report that we are going to highlight a bit in the chat. But most of the time today will be them asking questions and you posting questions to them in that Q&A section. So I'm going to serve as one of your moderators. I'm the Senior Director of Research at AACRAO, and we also have Bridget. Bridget, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Wendy. Hi, everyone. I'm Bridget Moran. I'm our content manager here at CourseDog, so working on all things content and research related. Really excited to be here for this discussion today and talk a little bit about scheduling.
We want to say thank you to CourseDog, who made this research possible for us. And this is the third project we've had with CourseDog studying these related areas. And Bridget, would you like to say a little bit more about CourseDog?
Yes, definitely. So as Wendy just mentioned, we've been working with AACRAO across this whole year, exploring many of the topics that kind of fall under that umbrella of academic operations. So whether that's scheduling, managing curriculum changes, thinking about how you create the course catalog, and many of those other related topics. And so really the goal of this for us is to better understand how institutions currently manage these processes, how they can be optimized to improve administrators' experiences, and also, of course, help the student experience. This is something that we're really passionate about. And specifically, we work with institutions so they can manage all of these different processes in one user-friendly platform. And our goal is to really reduce the amount of time that administrators have to spend manually entering that data, and then, of course, coordinating that data, from multiple sources, departments, all of that good stuff. So really, the ultimate goal of this is to help institutions enhance these processes for the student experience, so students can do all of that good stuff, like access the courses they need and stay on track for completion. So that's just a little bit about what we do. Like I said, very excited to discuss these survey results. So I'll hand it back over to Wendy now.
Thank you, Bridget. And sorry about the technical difficulty there. I was trying to repost the link to the report in the chat, and I clicked on the link, which brought us to the report page. So Now everybody knows it works. You can click on the link that's in the chat section and that'll take you to the report. But again, thank you to CourseDog and to Bridget and her team for helping us with subject matter expertise in the survey we deployed here. Today, we're going to have our panelists, and Gavin's going to join us in a little bit. He's running behind with an emergency meeting, and we have the rest of our folks here. Mike, Jason, and Joe will introduce themselves when we get to that section before they start answering the questions, but they are all part of our Research Advisory Board, which is a group of volunteers for AACRAO, and we're very grateful to their participation on that Research Advisory Board and for this panelist discussion. As you can see from their roles and responsibilities in institutions, we have a wide variety of perspectives to hear from today, which is always useful and helpful. So the benchmarking effort, thanks to the members who are participating today and others, we had 340 US institutions respond, and this was undergraduate scheduling practices. So that is actually a representative sample statistically of undergraduate serving institutions in the United States, representing 48 states and Puerto Rico, and 41% of them were public institutions. So pretty good balance there. One of the things we've been learning in going through this process and engaging members in our discussion about class scheduling and catalog work is that there's a lot of interchangeable terms that people use: class or section or course or term or semester or a lot of different things. And so we're trying to actually, and AACRAO is going to do this as a goal, is build an online glossary of the terms and put these things out there together. So we want to make sure that when we're talking about a course in the context of this data, it's the details that reside at the catalog level, various types of information that you're familiar with, level, course learning outcomes, those kind of things. So that is what we mean by course in this context. What we mean by class is a course that has been built into the schedule and is available for registration for a particular term. And a course may be offered as a class several times in each term. I know this kind of seems strange to be talking about these things, but people really do use these terms to mean different things. And we found that in the survey and in our discussions. Section, some institutions use the term section to differentiate more than one instance of the same class. Others use sections as a standalone term, meaning the same as class. So there's we're gonna have a test on this later. No. And then term is, in this context, is an institution's academic calendar or length of classes offered and is used throughout the survey and the results here. A term might be a full semester, a trimester, or a quarter, or a term might be an 8-week course offered in another period of time less than the full semester. So that's what we're trying to bring us all together when we start to talk about the data here. That's what we mean when we use these terms. And also class scheduling and timetabling are interchangeable terms and used from one institution to the other, sometimes by different people in different departments. We'll call them different things that use those terms interchangeably, but it's the practice that accounts for all the details needed to offer the classes to students in any particular term. So key insights, we're going to hit a few areas before we open it up to the panelists, and that the factors that influence class schedule creation, want to know what the various things that are taken into consideration. The scheduling availability, so when it is available to the students to either view or register or both, and changes, when are those changes made and how are they changed and what's the magnitude of them. How institutions use a variety of data to influence or analyze what they should be offering or intend to offer in their class schedule, and the impact of these practices on student success. For those of you who were able to join us a couple of weeks ago in our modern registrar discussion, we started talking about this concept of student centricity and how that influences practice and policy and how institutions embrace that. That was also part of this survey and research here, and our panelists will be discussing it. So the student centricity or lack thereof, or intention to be so, and about class scheduling practices. So factor scheduling, they were allowed to pick all that applied, and faculty availability is picked by 89%, not surprising, because if you don't have faculty to teach it, you can't offer the class. The one that stands out, as you can see there in that red percentage is that 78% of the 340 institutions indicated that faculty preference plays a role in when classes are scheduled. That's a pretty surprising number, and I'd love to hear from our panelists about how that influences how they do their class schedules at their institution. But that takes away a little bit from student centricity. It just depends on where that's weighed, because this is not rank order. This is just the multiple factors that were selected. So the class schedule from the previous term, so a lot of institutions roll it over. Probably not surprising there. Space availability, and then all those other considerations down there. You see that there's not a ton of things that really say that pull student specific data into them. As you start looking at student centric inputs, the percentage of people who use those decreases in this chart. When we asked them to say, okay, you picked all of those things, you indicated all of these that were influences or not for their scheduling practice, we said, what are the top 3? So what have the most weight? The class scheduling from the previous years for the same term had the highest weight, about half of the people. But again, faculty availability and faculty preference weighed in there as ranking as the top 1, 2, and 3 categories for 40 and 50% around of the institutions. So faculty preference is a driving force in the undergraduate class schedule, and overcoming it takes a great deal of work, because it's a practice that has been around for a long time, right? It used to be one of the primary, or has always been one of the primary driving factors. But it's also tied to the limited use of available data to understand student scheduling needs. So when institutions don't have all of this other student data or don't have the way to analyze it, there's not as much ability for those schedulers and administrators to come and say, hey, look, our students actually need these classes at this time or on this day or in this format for them to be able to complete in a timely manner. So other factors will take preference or have more influence at that time. We asked when the schedule is built and accessed and available to students. The dark blue is accessible by students, and the lighter blue is when it's built. So you can see about half of the institutions open the schedule for either being visible to the student or registration less than 1 academic term in advance. So even though we have been talking for a few years about a full year scheduling and those kind of things, and encouraging institutions, they might want to think about that for planning purposes and for the student and for the institution, it's not particularly common practice right now. So you can see down there that it's built by a full academic year in advance, but just 12% of institutions. But even among those, only 3% give students access to see it. So we're still operating under this 1 academic term or less than 1 academic term in advance of when these schedules are either built or available to students as the predominant model. One of the things that comes up in conversations when we consult with institutions is, how are your scheduling practices or your scheduling changes? When do they occur, under what conditions, and how frequently are they taking place? So this is after the schedule is open and accessible to students. It might be after it's already open for registration that changes are still being made to the schedule. So it drops off pretty rapidly. You can see that it's really at the lower end. It's less than 1% says none, fewer than 10% of the courses are changes, 39%, 33%. But we have about 8% that do more than 30% of the changes occur after. So there are a few outliers there. Ideally, in a perfect world, right, we wouldn't make any changes to the schedule after it's already accessible to students, if at all possible, because they're starting to make plans and arrange their work schedules, their home life schedules, and other things. And as we change schedules after the fact, it can impact them. 66% of their institutions report that all classes must meet a certain minimum enrollment limits or they're canceled. Also a pretty common practice. When you see the report, There's other permutations of that sometimes it's only by specific departments or specific programs that have to meet specific enrollment goals. Otherwise, they're allowed to let the class run. So practice varies. As I always say, almost every report, we say practice has a lot of variety and policy as well in what we do in colleges to help support students. A lot of variety. Wanted to take a deeper dive into that use of data and student-centric schedules. So this was the level of agreement with the statement, our institutions engages in student-centered class scheduling by use of data to support class scheduling. This is a pretty complex chart because it's an overlay of two charts. So they basically, if the color coding is if they're using data, with the darker, the sort of medium blue being none or very use of data, and then the green is the significant predictive analytics. So what I read from this data is that if they use data and they use it well, modest or significant uses of data, they are more likely to strongly agree that the institution engages in student-centered class scheduling. I hypothesized that would be the case, but I wanted to see if the data supported that in the 340 institutions. And it looks like it does, that as the use of data goes up, the agreement that there's student-centric practicing for scheduling increases. So we had the institutions, this is disaggregating the data a little bit. Does your institution engage in student-centric scheduling? We had 27% agree or strongly agree, but we also on the other end of the scale had either neutral responses or disagreement from 43% of institutions. So it's not a widely adopted practice to engage in student-centric scheduling. And that's something AACRAO is actually trying to shift. We want to help institutions engage and use their data and learn from their students in a way that helps meet the completion goals and helps students to progress through their degree in a timely and efficient manner. We learned from our respondents when we asked them, what do you think are characteristics of student-centric scheduling? They were able to type in free responses. Responses include that the student's need is assessed using several criteria, that the use from educational plans is to project needs is also there, and the use of data from past terms to project needs. So fill rate, waitlist rate, some of those other characteristics or factors we talked about were among the things that institutions said they believed described student-centric scheduling. Among the institutions that did not feel that they were using student-centric scheduling particularly well, we asked them to describe or select reasons why they were not able to do so, and not enough time to perform the appropriate data analysis was about half of those who indicated that, or exactly half, and lack of staff with expertise to analyze the data or a lack of the tool to analyze the data. So those top three things are not surprising to me. That's what we see in a lot of these challenges, not just class scheduling, but degree audit, registration, strategic enrollment management plans, all those kind of things that take data and the analysis of data. That's typically what we see. We need time, we need people, and we need the technology to be able to do it. And some institutions are challenged with that. So we also see that there's a lack of buy-in from institutional leadership sometimes as well. Sometimes the data is not as clean as they need it to be, so they can't access it, or it's difficult to understand. We did have 12% though say that they have data is used to forecast scheduling needs with no problem. That was an exclusive choice. And we had others who remarked on things like, we have faculty pushback to using data to drive scheduling as an example of them, or continued permutations of time and resources were in the other category. So how class scheduling impacts student success? We had a few quotes here, and that how they did that, our annual survey to students who don't return tells us class availability is a big reason why they didn't come back. So if you can't offer the classes when they need it, they'll go someplace else. The waitlist information can tell people potentially that they don't offer enough high demand classes. Also, the reduction to a 4-day-a-week schedule at one institution creates a number of conflicts which prevents the students from enrolling in appropriate courses. So they're trying to shorten the number of days people have to be on campus, but then they have the co-enrollment and concurrent enrollment conflicts. A student registers for a combination of classes can impact the success of the student, specifically a first-time student. So are they registering for the right mix of classes based upon what they think they can complete in that semester successfully? Or are they really registering for those classes in that mix because that's the only combination that works for them to meet their scheduling needs? So that's the only possible permutation for them among the offerings offered. 16%, only 16% report that data has provided insights into how undergraduate class scheduling practices impact student success. So that number of uptake is just, even though some are using the data in a significant way, the data is not necessarily tied directly to student success. It's maybe tied directly to how the classes are offered, but not whether or not those things are influencing completion and time to degree and cost of degree. So that's still an emerging field. So now I want to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. We're going to bring our Brady Bunch group back here and have everyone introduce themselves and engage in our Q&A. So welcome again, panelists. And Gavin was able to join us. Gavin, thank you very much. Thank you to everyone, but Gavin was texting me, I'm in another meeting and might not have been able to join us. So pleasure to have you here with us. And I'd like you to tag team with each other if you want to take about 60 seconds to introduce yourself. And in that time, also about that time, not holding you to it, answer the first question. Does anything from the data surprise you? If so, in what way does it surprise you? So introduce yourselves and give your thoughts on that question, and go ahead and tag team or tag the next person to answer it, please. Oh, they're being shy.
Well, I would, thank you, Wendy. I'd be happy to jump in and go first. Appreciate the invitation to participate in the panel. Thank you, Wendy. And that research report is just tremendous, really well done. And thanks to all the participants. So my name is Mike Flanagan. I'm the Associate Vice President for Strategic Initiatives and Project Management at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. We're about a 30,000 student university. We have a medical campus. We have a small campus in Qatar dedicated to the arts. And we have a more traditional academic and liberal arts campus about 2 miles west of our medical campus. My role at the institution is working with the Division of Strategic Enrollment Management and Student Success. I work on lots of projects that cut across organizational boundaries, trying to build a holistic vision for how we can implement initiatives that will move the university forward in a strategic way. And in fact, our strategic plan this time around includes a pillar of student success very prominently situated, which is where I put this research project, being student-centric, as being student success driven. I think I would say the one thing that I was surprised, but I shouldn't have been surprised by this, was one of the slides that you put up, Wendy, and that was that with more data comes more student centricity in building that plan. I was surprised, but I shouldn't have been by that. But I was heartened and thought it was really validating for the case for using data-based, data evidenced kinds of initiatives as that goes through. So that's a little bit about me and a little bit about what surprised me about this really well done project. Thank you. And I would toss that to Jason.
Thanks, Mike. I'm Jason Brown. I am with Pima Community College. We're a large multi-campus community college in Tucson, Arizona. We have about right around 30,000 unduplicated headcount, so we're a pretty big dog. I think some of the most the interesting stuff. There was a ton in the report. Actually, I found really interesting. I do agree with Mike's point that as you use data more, you become more student centric, and I think that's something that we've experienced at my institution. As we start looking more closely at the students' needs as expressed through data rather than just opinion, we start driving our scheduling, we drive our curriculum, we drive our instruction, we drive everything at the campus and all the way up to the college or university. You're driving things towards being more student-centric by taking that objective look using data at what students need, as opposed to just this sort of almost performative things we sometimes do, which is just like asking students what they want, which is nice, but it doesn't necessarily drive good data. So yeah, and thanks for having me. I'm really excited to see the report. And I'll throw it to Joe.
Hi, hello everyone. Thanks again to AACRAO for the opportunity to join you this afternoon, and to my fellow panelists, looking forward to the conversation. I'm Joe Paris. I serve as the Executive Director of Graduate Admissions at Westchester University, which is a part of the Pennsylvania system of higher education. It's the largest institution in the system with approximately 17,000 students. I serve in the graduate admissions capacity, but prior to my time at Westchester, and I recently arrived, so I'm 3 months into my new position at Westchester. I served for 11 years at Temple University in 2 capacities, one as Assistant Dean of Enrollment Management and Marketing in the College of Education and Human Development, and then also as a full-time faculty member in the higher education program, as well as the higher education program coordinator. And so I bring a couple of perspectives to this conversation, certainly having spent many years thinking about our general education curriculum in the higher education program, but then also our undergraduate student population in the broader College of Education and Human Development at Temple. I actually found 2 really interesting takeaways from the AACRAO report. The first is the extent to which there's a balance that may come out of these findings between student centricity, course scheduling to really focus on student success, but also course scheduling for the purpose of revenue generation, right? And how is that balanced, right? Making decisions to promote enrollment objectives, right? And tuition revenue among them. And the second is that I'm curious about sort of the general education versus upper level course balance and how scheduling may differ, especially as faculty may feel more closely aligned their intellectual expertise with the upper level courses that may be scheduled differently than gen eds with multiple sections and things. And so maybe that'll come out in our conversations as well. And I thought the Go Rams was for the Westchester University Rams, but it was actually maybe also for the Virginia Commonwealth Rams. And so Go Rams applies, it seems, to multiple institutions today.
Totally willing to share, Joe, just saying.
Gavin, please go right ahead.
Good afternoon. Gavin Ham, Associate Vice President of Grand Lake State University, historical Black College in the Piney Hills of Northern Louisiana. And I'm honored to serve here at my alma mater in this capacity. I'm a former financial aid director. And so I have a vested interest in course scheduling and how it impacts enrollment and indeed student success. Some of the glaring data points are the fact that, some of the decisions that we make is based upon the preferences of staff and faculty, employees of the university, and we are trying to move toward this student-centric philosophy. And so we still have a way to go. But along those same lines, I'm encouraged about the number of respondents who indicated that they are indeed aware that some of their decisions are not necessarily student-centric, or some of their decisions do not involve decision-making, the preferences of students. So that awareness is key. But as we continue to try to move the envelope towards making this positive change based upon the data, that's when we can make a big difference.
Thank you. Again, I always value all these different perspectives. You different types of institutions, different current roles, and different previous roles. So it helps us a lot. And again, membership. If you those who are participating today, if you want to ask Q&A questions, go ahead and put them in that Q&A section, and we will get to them towards the end. So the second question I have for you, and again, you guys can bounce off each other, ask other questions, do follow-ups to each other, however you'd like to do it, is how would you describe your institution's level of student-centric scheduling, and what challenges, if any, does your institution face embracing student-centric scheduling?
I'll start on this one. I would say our status is evolving, and I'm pretty sure that's most institutions. We probably less than 4 years ago started going the direction a lot of community colleges and a lot of institutions are going, and like moving to sort of more constricted pathways for students to promote student success. And with that came having to make sure that the scheduling of courses reflected those needs, reflected the fact that we had students that needed a particular course in a particular semester, and we needed to get that right, just to make sure that the whole pathways idea and project work. And I think we've had some pretty decent success with it. One of the major challenges, I mean, I think a lot of the responses from institutions in the survey point to this. One of the major challenges was technology, and I think a lot of institutions share this problem. And in broad strokes, what it is that we have all of this diverse technology that we're trying to make work together and talk to each other, and there isn't a single solution for all these things. So I won't name companies or anything, but we have a student information system from one company. We have a registration kind of student admissions module from another company. Our catalog and our curriculum management systems are from another company. Some of our early alert things and other ways we reach out to students are from another company, and our scheduling is from yet another company. So trying to integrate all that technology to get it to talk to each other using APIs or all those kinds of things is a huge burden in terms of sort of back-end infrastructure to get this stuff working and maintained. So I'd say the technology was a real challenge, or is a real challenge in this area. And I'll throw it to whoever else wants to go next.
I'll jump in if I may. I like the idea that, we at our institution, we have a nurturing environment by just definition of who we are, just at us at our core. So we have the thought of what students need embedded in our minds. But as other colleagues have mentioned, that challenge of using the proper technology to make these data-driven decisions, that's a challenge. Some type of metric-based decision-making. So getting our hands on the data in a real sense, in some succinct manner. That way it's not just some type of hypothetical ideas that we're throwing out, but we can see where our students are and what the courses they need. Having that data that does tell the story for us, that's an area in which we can grow.
So
Anyone else go ahead, Mike.
Sorry, I liked Jason's characterization of his institutions evolving. I was, until he had actually said evolving out loud, I was going to classify mine as primitive, but I think I'm going to actually use evolving, Jason. So thanks very much for the terminology lesson. We too have an ecosystem of technologies that are somewhat connected, but also somewhat disconnected. So depending on which technology you're actually viewing the course schedule through, we're either doing a great job or we're doing a terrible job. But I think the problem is the level at which the view needs to take place doesn't really exist. So we don't have a central repository that we can put our student information system course information along with our course scheduling systems recommended location data to combine with where our students are in their degree path or their major map at the particular time and where they need to go to be able to put all of those into a recommended solution for what your actual course schedule would look like. So in one sense, we're very technologically advanced, I think, because we've got a lot of technology, but we're a little primitive in the way that we've strung those technologies together, in that there's no central unified view for being able to come up with a data-informed answer to that. So hence, I really do like the term evolving, Jason. Thanks very much for that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. When I hear technology and hear what we're talking about here, we're talking about a lot of what we're talking is the back office work. So I want to tag on here before we move to a couple of questions that are actually in the chat. I can see them there. Just a reminder, if you wouldn't mind, put them in the Q&A so we don't see them scroll and disappear in the chat. But has anybody taken a look at the user interface for student scheduling and how student-centric that user interface is? Any comments there?
I can actually speak to that a bit. I know in my previous experience at Temple University, the institution held actually a number of focus groups on a number of things. We have a large non-degree population that we shouldn't lose sight of, right? In these conversations, these are students who were an important source of revenue for the institution and also rely heavily on the transparency of our course schedules, as their course taking patterns can be much more challenging to predict than our matriculated population. So one thing we did was not only focus groups for current matriculated students, but we actually held a focus group for non-degree seeking students at the institution, asking us to take us through the journey of having an interest in enrolling in coursework and how you would navigate identifying what's available in what modalities, how those courses may fulfill degree requirements should you decide to go from non-degree and pursue an admissions process and become a degree-seeking student. And so focus groups were an excellent way to yield insights regarding the process by which students navigated the available information, even instructor information about previous instructors, ratings of those instructors, and make decisions about course taking patterns. So focus groups will be something I would encourage institutions to think about.
Thank you very much. We can sometimes we focus a bit on the back office and forget about that UI side. And there are so many different interfaces from all the different products out there for scheduling. A few of them mirror like the Amazon interface or the shopping interface that people used to. A lot of them though still kind of mirror that older school, like it just seems foreign to most students these days, or younger students, like, what do you mean I have to like click on a bunch of drop down menus to find a class? And then, so the technology from the user interface isn't necessarily keeping up with expectations. So we have a question from Adam that ties into our next question that kind of together. So Adam's asking, what data or data points are universities using to discern best scheduling practice in student-centric scheduling? Tied to the prepackaged question that I have, which is basically what factors are currently used to support student-centric scheduling, and what do you hope to use in the future? So some data points and what factors do you hope to start using that you're not currently using?
I'll jump in on that. So we try and use a as broad as possible number of factors. So things like course fill rates, waitlist times, waitlist numbers. We also have other data. Classroom utilization is a big one in terms of a large multi-campus college. We don't want to. We try and balance the sort of competing needs of, we want a student to be able to complete their certificate or degree program without having to do too much driving around town to different campuses. But then again, we don't want to have one campus overloaded in terms of the number of sections of courses on that campus and have no sort of downtime on classrooms, and another campus that has lots of open space and time. So there's balancing that happens with multi-campus too, which can be sort of not an intuitive, like, how do we serve students kind of data point, but it really is, because we don't want students taking 40, 50 minutes out of their day or more driving from campus to campus to get the courses they want. So it affects scheduling in a way that affects how students succeed.
Some things that I've seen in my experience is that we've used a lot of historical information, which came out in the report as well. That oftentimes we go based upon what was done the previous semester, the previous terms. What I would like to see more is student needs direct survey data from students, and just to kind of probe to see, would it be valuable to rethink the scheduling concept based upon some type of forecast and preferences, just kind of like almost like the consumer market. That's my business side coming out. What do the consumers need to help attract more consumers, if you will?
Anyone else?
I just like to echo what Gavin said about historical data. That is probably I'm guessing the most common and sort of the most utilized data point is looking at prior schedules and seeing which classes got enough enrollment to run, and that kind of very basic look back is probably the most key piece of data that we use. At least that's what forms the foundation of our schedule each term, is looking at how it performed the prior spring or the 2 springs before, something like that. We would look at that spring term and go, okay, we know these courses are needed because they filled, and we know these other courses are maybe needed, maybe not. We need more data on them because they didn't fill.
Mike, you wanted to say something?
I was going to just add 2 quick things. I think prior to going online during COVID, one of the elements that we were looking for, and one of the drivers behind the purchase of an add-on product that we had, was how many students are taking courses that are near enough to each other that they could walk from one section to the next within a reasonable amount of time. I think it's a more micro version of what Jason talked about, driving between campuses, and what Joe was talking about as well. But that was the distance between those classrooms when we were much more physically focused was an important one. And I think we'll come back to that as more and more of our courses come online, because we're a residential institution. The in-person experience is important as a part of the philosophy that we're using. But I also think the second piece was another add-ons piece of software that we bought several years ago, allowed students to access our student schedule in a way that's very different than the way that they had been able to access it. They're able to use this particular product to go in, identify courses that they want to take, and have the software do the heavy lifting and present every possible combination of schedules that are available and open to them that they can select and send to the student information system. So accessing the course schedule as it's available, accessing the available course options and allowing them an easy way to be able to get a hold of it. And the access in there is an important piece of the factors that we use as well.
Thank you. So we have a tough question for you, because it's a challenging one. It's a sensitive one, I think. It's about that faculty preference. Weighting as such a currently important factor for most institutions who responded, and ranked in the top 3 of the factors for about, 30%? I can't keep all those data points in my head, but as one of the top 3 factors in how classes are scheduled. And that differs very much from faculty availability, but this is truly faculty preference. So I'm gonna anecdote. I was working at an institution once as a consultant, and one of the stories about faculty preference was that a faculty member had a massage scheduled at a certain time every week, and that was no classes could be scheduled at that time because that's when they had the massage. So that's an extreme example of faculty preference, but it plays a role for a lot of institutions. So what are your recommendations to those institutions that are trying to limit the influence of faculty preference on the class scheduling process?
if I could recommend anything, I think that it would be helpful. You know, it's easy to just assume faculty preference shouldn't be included at all. That's easy to just assume. But before making an assumption, I would like to know, why is that a faculty preference? Each particular course, because it may come from a pure place of knowledge that needs to be brought to the table, which is indeed a student-centric reason. But if it's not a student-centric reason that's a preference, then I think we need to reevaluate.
Gavin, that is a very good point, because our data doesn't ask that, whether or not the faculty preferences are not, I have a massage at such and such time, but actually grounded in, hey, it's very important that these classes are offered in this way, in this format, because of this student-centered decision. Opportunity for future research.
And just to extend from Gavin's point, right, there are certainly pedagogical reasons for why faculty preference may come into play, but also to the point I was making when I introduced myself, certain courses, especially upper level undergraduate courses, and certainly many graduate level courses, you know, only one faculty member may have the expertise. Maybe they design the course, again, maybe it aligns with their intellectual identity and their areas of intellectual expertise. And so that dynamic, I think, makes it more prevalent that faculty preference comes into play when courses such as that are being scheduled, right? Especially when we're thinking about our full-time faculty, in some cases, our tenured faculty and our more senior faculty members who, from a political dynamic perspective, also have influence within our institutions. And so I think that certainly comes into play, as opposed to, you know, multi-section general education courses that are instructed by non-tenure track faculty, by adjunct or contractual faculty. And so there is certainly a dynamic that I think is playing into why faculty preference may have appeared in the results so prevalently.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there are multiple factors that contribute to that, and you know, there are ones that are directly related to academics, like they want a particular classroom because of the technology in that classroom or something like that, or they want a particular time because they know their course tends to fill better if they offer it at a particular time of day or on particular days of the week. So there's that sort of self-interest there, but then there's also some really legitimate, I think, work-life balance things that go along with that faculty preference, like wanting I've heard anecdotally from our faculty wanting to teach at the campus closest to their house, so they're not commuting a long time. Wanting to be able to teach a hybrid schedule, so some online, some in person. Enjoying the interaction with students in person and getting energy out of that, but also enjoying the flexibility of teaching online. So I think there's a lot of balancing that happens even amongst faculty themselves that contributes to that decision making.
I find it fascinating that you guys are coming at it from that perspective. It's not something that I thought about, but we do have the other end of the scale, and where it's the, you know, I don't want to teach across from that person because we don't get along, which I've heard that one as well when I've consulted. You know, I don't want to be in the opposite classroom from them. Or I've heard also I don't like the sunlight at that time of day in that classroom, so please don't put me there. So things, you know, those are the kind of things that pop to my mind, but you all actually just sort of blew that up, right? You said, hey, wait a minute, there's this other stuff out there too. There's the pedagogical things. There's probably a whole bunch of other that have some student-centric component that institutions should understand. It's interesting to me that technology, that if you fully apply some of the available technologies, you can take faculty preference out entirely, right? It's schedule optimization based upon educational planning data, your classroom characteristics, to Jason's point, what resources does it have in it, and the blocks of availability, and probably even how far apart they are, like campus distances and or building differences. So the technology exists where you can take almost all of that human interface out, and scheduling software solutions will say, yeah, we can do this for you. But we find, just as you're describing, that doesn't usually happen because there's a whole bunch of reasons why it doesn't. But you also all stated that we are encouraging more student-centric scheduling, looking at the data, and maybe that will start to minimize the less positive influences of faculty preference, like just the ones that are not student-centric or pedagogically centric. So thank you for opening up that in my mind. I truly had not thought about that at all. So one last question before we move on. Let's see to the Q&A, because it's in the chat, so I want to make sure I get to it here. It's from Jessica. It says, pre-COVID, the Department of Ed and our accreditor was determined to assign a course that used any level on online component, even if supplemental, as an online course, which, as we know, has an impact on accreditation. Post-COVID, this has created tension in the interest in more flexibility in scheduling from students and faculty, something Jason alluded to about faculty mixed hybrid, and the demand to be 100% in person from administration. What are your thoughts on this? So now there's this tension that during COVID, high flexibility, high online percentage, and now a shift where the administration wants people to come back on campus, like Mike has suggested, residential campuses, and students and faculty don't necessarily.
So I think that some of what you're talking about, I think, and what's embedded in that question really is a question of trying to abstract this out a little bit. What is the best modality for the student to learn that particular course in? When you talk about student-centric, student success, that really needs to be the driver as much as possible in the determination of whether you're going to be take that particular course online, hybrid, high flex, whatever teaching modality and learning modality you're going to be employing in that. And my perfect world preference would be it's the learning modality that really ought to be driving how that course is being implemented, because that's the key to student centricity, which is really what's underneath student success. Hard to convince an accreditor of that, even harder to convince your bosses of that. But of course, that really is what's underneath, in my opinion.
I think another piece of it is sort of overcoming perceived faculty inequity. So as a community college, we have a lot of career and technical education courses. It is really, really difficult to teach somebody how to weld in a virtual format. And those faculty really need to be there so the college doesn't get burned down, right? So the faculty in that program don't have the flexibility that some of our general education faculty have. And, and I'd extend that to the entire college employment base, to the staff, faculty at all levels, is that some positions, some jobs are going to have that flexibility, and you can schedule more flexibly those courses because of the the content of the course and the learning that needs to happen, and others are not. But I think one of the barriers we've felt a bit is with the sort of drive to move everybody back to campus, the pushback has been, well, I'm teaching more effectively from a virtual or in a fully online kind of way. Why should I come back to campus? And the opposing argument is, well, some other faculty have to come back to campus, so you do too, or some other staff have to come back to campus, so you do too. So the way my institution is dealing with it is we've never had a remote work kind of policy. And that is something that we're now developing as an institution to sort of, put the guardrails on working remotely and kind of say, when is it appropriate, when is it not, and try and get it sort of codified in policy to make it more equitable, or at least feel more equitable for everybody.
Thank you. Gavin, you were going to add something?
I was just going to add to Mike's comment, and I think that his comments is an encouraging factor for us to be advocates for change on a global standpoint, even to accrediting agencies. I think now is the time that we prepare data around these concepts about coming back to campus and modality and all these considerations. I think that we are charged in this day and age to take these things to the highest level. beyond our campuses, beyond our departments, beyond our colleges, and go as high as we can to see effective change that are based upon students' needs and the success of students.
Thank you very much. We have about 5 minutes, and we have a couple of questions. I want to try to get to them here. The first is, how should the class capacity be determined? Should it be based upon classroom size, faculty preference, or need of student schedules? Or all of the above, right?
Yeah, I'd say all of the above. I mean, there are fundamental constraints like classroom size that you can't make it bigger. It's just, it is what it is. There's elements of the pedagogy of the course. I mean, if you're teaching an intensive writing course and you have a single faculty that's going to have to grade many multiple page papers, there's a limit to what you can ask a faculty member to do in a single instance, right? So there are, a whole ton of factors. Also, some content may need to be taught in a much more individualized way. We'll use my welding example, right? You can't just sort of stand up there and say, do this. You have to actually look over the student's shoulder and make sure that they're getting a bead and doing all the right things on the weld. And you can't teach as many students that with a single faculty member. So I think multiple factors is the key on this one. You have to look at everything.
And in some cases, it may be accreditation requirements, depending on the program, depending upon, the accreditor. And so that's another factor that often may dictate class size capacity.
Thank you. I had to read this question a couple of times, and I think I get it. The Vicky asked, and I love her terminology here because I finally get it. How do you address the balance when the registrar is charged to create a student-centric scheduling system that may lead to being invited to faculty council to be, and she says, well feathered. So it took me a bit. I'm like, I get it. So basically not the warmest reception in faculty council when he or she goes there to find out, to defend this student-centric scheduling. So how would you address the balance and for that?
I think that registrar probably, if they don't already have one, could use a faculty advisory group to help buffer that just a little bit. I think, I learned a long time ago when I was an RA in college that people support what they help build. And I think that applies equally to the faculty and throughout any of the institutional things that we have. And that's encourage your faculty to participate in the building of a student-centric or student success-oriented course schedule with you, so that it's not quite as lonely when you go to faculty senate or to some of those other areas. You have some folks that can introduce you and introduce your ideas for you.
I think this also underscores the importance of data, right? Being able to come to a faculty council and present the data that supports the decision. I think that sometimes empirical evidence is hard to argue with, right? And so that's what I think underscores the importance of having the data that we discussed today.
Yeah, and I'd echo Joe's point there of saying that not only having the data, but setting up the systems by which you gather that data on the front end is a real key. So making sure that you're assessing student learning outcomes on every course, and you're assessing program learning outcomes through your program review process, and not just having that data sit, taking that data and using it to help drive decision-making, but also to help publicly support those decisions, saying, hey, here's what the data shows, is a lot more powerful than, hey, we're going this direction, like it or not.
And everything that my colleagues have stated has been 100% accurate. The only thing that I would add to that or supplement that with is just identifying common agreements and common disagreements. We all have some form of common ground. It's people relationships 101. It's always going to be well fettered. So expect it, embrace it, and go with it.
Seriously, I had to read, thank you very much. I had to read it a few times and I'm like, wow, that's a great way to phrase it. Thank you for your expertise. We have a couple questions left, but we're out of time. So if you want to, our panelists can, if it's directed at them, if you wouldn't mind putting your email addresses in there, one of them specifically about flexible classrooms and where specific layouts, where reservations had been updated, and then some issues with technology. Would this be an issue with Course Dog? So if you use Course Dog specifically, or if Bridget and her team want to answer that, please put your email out there. And the last one was an anonymous one, but what is the impact of school hours in getting a credible schedule that is student-centric? That's a pretty broad question, but if you want to put your emails out there, folks can, happy to email you directly or me. Again, wendyk@acrao.org. The report was released. Thank you very much, panelists and participants. As usual, couldn't do this without you. Members, participants, we couldn't do this research without you. So thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a good day.